Sam never expected his summer vacation to turn into the greatest adventure of his life. But that is exactly what happened when his parents sent him to stay with his grandmother in the old house at the edge of the forest. The 12-year-old boy arrived on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, carrying his backpack and feeling quite unhappy about leaving his friends behind for an entire month. And he could not understand why his parents thought this would be a good idea, when he could have spent his summer playing video games and riding his bicycle around the neighborhood. His grandmother was a kind old woman with silver hair and wrinkled hands that were always busy making cookies or knitting sweaters, and she greeted Sam with a warm hug and led him inside the creaky old house that smelled like lavender and old books. "You will love it here," she said with a gentle smile, "and I have so many stories to tell you about this house and the secrets it holds." Believe her at first, because he thought nothing exciting could ever happen in such a quiet and boring place. But he smiled politely and followed her up the stairs to his room on the second floor. The bedroom was small but cozy, with a soft bed covered in colorful quilts, and a window that looked out over the dark and mysterious forest behind the house. And Sam felt a strange tingling sensation run down his spine as he stared at the tall trees swaying in the wind. That night he could not sleep because the house made so many strange noises, with the floorboards creaking and the walls groaning like an old giant trying to stretch its bones. And Sam lay in bed with his eyes wide open, listening to every sound. Around midnight, he heard something that made his heart beat faster and his breath catch in his throat, and it was the sound of music, soft and beautiful, coming from somewhere deep within the house. He climbed out of bed and tiptoed across the cold wooden floor, following the enchanting melody down the hallway and past his grandmother's room, where she was snoring peacefully. And the music seemed to be coming from the end of the corridor, where a thick velvet curtain hung on the wall. Sam had noticed that curtain earlier in the day, but had not thought much about it, assuming it was just covering a window, or perhaps an old painting that his grandmother did not want anyone to see. But now he realized there was something much more interesting behind it. He reached out with trembling fingers and pulled the curtain aside, gasping in amazement when he discovered a small wooden door that was only about 3 feet tall, with a brass handle shaped like a crescent moon, and strange symbols carved into the wood. The music was definitely coming from behind this door, and it was the most beautiful sound Sam had ever heard, like 1,000 tiny bells ringing in harmony with flutes and harps, playing a melody that made him feel both happy and sad at the same time. He knew he should probably go back to bed and ask his grandmother about the door in the morning, but his curiosity was too strong, and before he knew what he was doing, his hand was on the handle, and he was turning it slowly. The door swung open without making a sound, and a warm golden light poured out, so bright that Sam had to shield his eyes with his arm. And when he finally looked through the doorway, he could not believe what he saw. There was a garden on the other side, but it was not like any garden he had ever seen before, with flowers that glowed in every color of the rainbow, and trees that had silver leaves and golden fruits. And the sky above was filled with 3 moons instead of 1. Sam stepped through the doorway, his bare feet touching soft grass that felt like velvet beneath his toes, and he turned around to look at the door behind him, which now appeared to be standing alone in the middle of the garden with nothing attached to it. "Welcome, young traveler," said a voice, and Sam spun around to see a small creature standing before him, no bigger than a cat, but with the face of a wise old man and the body of a fox with shimmering blue fur. "Who are you?" Sam asked, his voice shaking with a mixture of fear and excitement. "I am Felix, the guardian of the doorway between your world and ours," the creature replied with a bow. and I have been waiting for someone from the other side to find the door for a very long time." Sam looked around at the magical garden in wonder, noticing butterflies with wings made of crystal flying through the air, and tiny lights floating among the flowers like living stars, and he felt like he had stepped into a dream. "Where am I?" he asked Felix. "This is the land of Rumina, a world that exists alongside your own, but is hidden from those who do not know how to find it, and you are the first human to visit us in over 100 years. And Sam could hardly believe his ears, and he wondered if he was actually still in bed, dreaming this whole incredible experience. But when he pinched his arm, he felt the pain and knew that everything was real. Felix led him through the garden, along a path made of glowing stones, and they walked past a fountain that sprayed water upward in spirals that defied gravity, and a pond filled with fish that had wings and flew just above the surface. "Why was the door in my grandmother's house?" Sam asked as they walked. "That is a very good question," Felix replied with a mysterious smile, "and the answer is connected to a secret that your grandmother has kept hidden for many years. But that is a story for another time." Sam wanted to know more, but Felix suddenly stopped and pointed toward a tall hill in the distance, where a magnificent castle stood, with towers that touched the clouds, and windows that sparkled like diamonds in the light of the 3 moons. "The Queen of Lumina lives there," Felix explained, "and she is the one who has been playing the music that led you to the door, for she has been calling out to the other world, hoping that someone would finally answer." Sam felt a sudden urge to go to the castle and meet this mysterious queen, but Felix shook his head and told him that he must return to his grandmother's house before sunrise, or the door would close, and he would be trapped in Lumina forever. "But I have so many questions," Sam protested. "And you will have time to find the answers," Felix assured him, "because now that you have found the door, you can return whenever you wish, as long as you come through before midnight and leave before dawn." Sam reluctantly agreed to go back, and Felix led him to the door that still stood alone in the middle of the garden, glowing softly in the moonlight. And as he stepped through, he turned to wave goodbye to his new friend. "You tomorrow night," Sam promised. "I will be waiting," Felix replied with a warm smile. And then the door closed behind Sam, and he found himself standing in his grandmother's hallway once again. Sam woke up the next morning with his heart racing, and for a moment he thought everything had been a dream. But then he looked at his feet and saw tiny specks of golden dust clinging to his toes, and he knew that his adventure in Lumina had been completely real. He rushed downstairs to find his grandmother in the kitchen, stirring a pot of oatmeal and humming a tune that sounded strangely familiar. And Sam realized it was the same melody he had heard coming from behind the hidden door. "Grandma, I need to ask you something," Sam said, sliding into a chair at the old wooden table. "Of course, my dear, you can ask me anything," she replied without turning around. "Do you know about the door behind the curtain upstairs?" His grandmother stopped stirring and stood very still for a long moment, and when she finally turned to face him, Sam saw tears forming in her eyes and a strange look that was a mixture of sadness and joy. "So you found it," whispered, and her voice was trembling like a leaf in the wind. "I went through it last night, and I met a creature named Felix, and I saw the most amazing things." His grandmother sat down across from him and took his hands in hers, and Sam could feel that her fingers were cold and shaking as she looked into his eyes with an expression he had never seen before. "I was younger than you when I first discovered that door," she began, "and I spent many years traveling between our world and Lumina, making friends with the creatures there and learning about their magical ways." Sam listened in amazement as his grandmother told him stories of her adventures in the other world, describing the talking animals and the flying ships and the mountains made of crystal that sang when the wind blew through them. "Why did you stop going?" Sam asked, which she paused to wipe her eyes. Because I fell in love with your grandfather and started a family. I could not keep splitting my time between two worlds, so I made the difficult choice to stay here and raise my children in the human world. She explained that she had never forgotten about Lumina, and had always hoped that one day someone in her family would find the door and continue the connection between the two worlds, and now her wish had finally come true. But there is something you must know, she said with a serious expression, because Lumina is facing a great danger, and that is why the Queen has been calling out through the music. Sam leaned forward, eager to hear more about this mysterious danger. A dark shadow has been spreading across the land, and it is draining the magic from everything it touches, turning the colorful flowers gray and making the creatures sick and weak, and no one knows where it came from or how to stop it. She told Sam that Felix had once come to visit her many years ago, appearing in her bedroom to beg for help, but she had been too old and too tired to make the journey, and she had feared that the door would remain unused forever. But now you are here, she said with a hopeful smile, and perhaps you are the one who can help save Lumina. Sam felt a heavy weight settle on his shoulders as he realized what his grandmother was asking him to do, and he was not sure if he was brave enough or smart enough to face such a big challenge. I am just a kid, he said quietly. Sometimes the youngest and smallest among us have the greatest courage, his grandmother replied, squeezing his hands gently. And I believe in you more than you believe in yourself. That day passed slowly, as Sam waited for night to come, and he could not focus on anything his grandmother said or did, because his mind kept wandering to thoughts of Lumina, and the dark shadow threatening to destroy it. When the clock finally struck midnight, Sam was already standing in front of the curtain, and he pulled it aside and opened the little door, stepping through into the golden light once more. Felix was waiting for him, just as he had promised, and the little creature looked even more tired and worried than he had the night before, with dark circles under his eyes, and his blue fur looking dull and matted. I am so glad you came back, Felix said with relief in his voice. My grandmother told me about the shadow, Sam replied, and I want to help if I can. Felix led him through the garden, but Sam noticed that some of the flowers had already lost their glow and were starting to wilt, and the crystal butterflies were flying slower than before, as if they were struggling to stay in the air. The shadow is getting stronger every day, Felix explained as they walked, and if we do not find a way to stop it soon, all of Lumina will be consumed by darkness. They climbed the hill toward the castle, passing through villages where strange and wonderful creatures lived in houses made of giant mushrooms and hollowed-out trees, and everyone they met looked at Sam with hope in their eyes. The human child has returned, they whispered to each other, and perhaps he will save us all. Sam felt uncomfortable with all the attention and expectation, but he tried to stand tall and look confident, even though his knees were shaking with fear. The castle gates opened as they approached, revealing a courtyard filled with statues that seemed to move when Sam was not looking directly at them, and servants in elegant robes rushed forward to greet them. The Queen has been expecting you, said a tall woman with silver skin and eyes that changed color like a kaleidoscope, and she is very eager to meet the grandson of her old friend. Sam followed the woman through long hallways decorated with paintings that showed scenes from Lumina's history, including battles against dark forces and celebrations of light and love. He wondered how many other humans had walked these same corridors. Finally, they reached the throne room, and Sam's breath caught in his throat when he saw the Queen sitting on a throne made of woven moonbeams, looking like the most beautiful and terrifying person he had ever seen. She was tall and graceful, with hair that flowed like a river of liquid gold, and a dress that seemed to be made of living flowers. that bloomed and wilted in an endless cycle. And her eyes were deep pools of starlight that saw straight into Sam's soul. "Welcome, young Sam," she said in a voice that was soft but powerful. "And thank you for answering my call." "I want to help," Sam replied, trying to keep his voice steady, "but I do not know what I can do." The queen rose from her throne and walked toward him, her footsteps making no sound on the marble floor, and she knelt down so that her face was level with his. "There is a prophecy," she said, "that was written long ago by the ancient seers of Lumina, and it tells of a child from the other world who will come in our darkest hour and bring back the light." She explained that the shadow was not a natural phenomenon, but a curse cast by a bitter and jealous sorcerer who had once been banished from Lumina for trying to steal the source of all magic. And now he had found a way to take his revenge from his prison in the void between worlds. "Only someone who belongs to both worlds can enter the void and confront him," the queen continued. "And you, Sam, with your human heart and your connection to Lumina through your grandmother, are the only one who can make the journey." Sam's head was spinning with all this information, and he wanted to say that there must be some mistake, that he was just an ordinary boy who played video games and could not even win a fight against his older cousin. But something in the queen's eyes made him stop. "I will try," he said finally, and those 3 words felt like the bravest thing he had ever said. The queen smiled and placed her hand on his head, and Sam felt a warmth spread through his entire body, filling him with courage he did not know he possessed. "Before you can enter the void, you must gather 3 sacred objects," she told him, "and each one is hidden in a different part of Lumina, guarded by challenges that will test your mind, your heart, and your spirit." Felix stepped forward and bowed to the queen before turning to Sam with determination in his eyes. "I will guide you on your quest," the little guardian said, "and together we will find the objects and save our world." Sam nodded, feeling a bond of friendship forming between himself and the strange creature. And he knew that whatever dangers lay ahead, he would not have to face them alone. The queen gave them her blessing and a map that showed the locations of the 3 sacred objects. And as Sam looked at the drawing of mountains and forests and seas, he felt both terrified and excited about the adventure that awaited him. Sam and Felix set out from the castle as the 3 moons began to sink toward the horizon, and Sam knew he would have to return home soon, but promised to come back the following night to begin the quest properly. Over the next several nights, Sam lived a double life, pretending to be a normal boy during the day, while his grandmother taught him everything she remembered about Lumina, and then sneaking through the magical door each night to continue his adventure. The first sacred object they needed to find was called the Crystal of Courage, and according to the map, it was hidden deep inside the Whispering Caves at the foot of the Silver Mountains, where no light had ever shone, and creatures of darkness made their home. Felix and Sam traveled through enchanted forests, where the trees had faces and liked to tell riddles, and across meadows filled with flowers that sang lullabies when the wind blew, and Sam found himself falling in love with the magical world more and more each day. "How much further to the caves?" Sam asked on the 3rd night of their journey. "We should reach them by tomorrow," Felix replied, "but I must warn you that the caves are extremely dangerous, and many brave warriors have entered them and never returned." Sam tried not to let his fear show, but his hands were sweating, and his stomach was doing flips as he thought about what might be waiting for them in the darkness. They made camp that night beside a stream that flowed with water that tasted like honey, and Felix told Sam stories about the history of Lumina and the great heroes who had protected it throughout the ages. "Your grandmother was one of the bravest people ever to visit our world," Felix said with admiration in his voice. "And she once saved an entire village from a flood by building a dam with nothing but her bare hands and determination." Sam could hardly believe that his sweet old grandmother had once been such a hero. But it made him feel proud and gave him hope that maybe he had inherited some of her courage. The next morning they reached the entrance to the Whispering Caves, and Sam understood immediately why they had earned their name. Because the wind blowing through the tunnels created sounds that were almost like voices, speaking words just too quiet to understand. "Stay close to me," Felix warned, "and do not listen to the whispers, because they will try to trick you and lead you astray." Sam nodded and followed the little guardian into the darkness, holding a torch made from a branch of the fire tree that burned with magical flames which could never be extinguished. The deeper they went, the louder the whispers became, and Sam could swear he heard his mother's voice calling his name, and then his father's voice telling him to come home, and then his friends laughing and asking why he had abandoned them. "They are not real," Felix reminded him. "Keep your eyes forward and your mind focused on our mission." It was the hardest thing Sam had ever done, ignoring those familiar voices and continuing to walk deeper into the cave. But he gritted his teeth and kept moving, until finally they reached a vast underground chamber that took his breath away. The walls were covered with thousands of tiny crystals that reflected the light from his torch in every direction, creating patterns that looked like entire galaxies spinning through space. And in the center of the chamber sat the Crystal of Courage on a pedestal of black stone. "This seems too easy," Sam said suspiciously. Just as the words left his mouth, the ground began to shake, and from the shadows emerged a creature so terrifying that Sam almost dropped his torch and ran. It was a giant spider made entirely of darkness, with 8 legs that moved like flowing shadows and countless red eyes that glowed with hunger and malice. And when it opened its mouth, the whispers grew so loud that Sam had to cover his ears. "This is the guardian of the crystal," Felix shouted over the noise, "and you must defeat it to prove your courage." Sam looked around desperately for something to use as a weapon, but all he had was his torch, and he doubted that fire could hurt a creature made of darkness. Then he remembered something his grandmother had told him about the magical creatures of Lumina, that the Dark Ones were not truly evil, but were creatures of fear and doubt, and they fed on the negative emotions of those they encountered. "Maybe I do not need to fight it," Sam said to himself, and he took a deep breath and stepped forward, holding his torch high. "I am not afraid of you," he shouted at the spider, even though his voice was shaking and his knees felt like jelly. The spider hissed and moved closer, its red eyes boring into Sam's soul, searching for the fear it knew must be hiding there. Thought about everything that made him afraid, about failing his quest and disappointing the Queen and his grandmother, about getting trapped in Lumina forever and never seeing his parents again, about being too small and too weak to make any difference. But then he thought about Felix, who had become his true friend, and about all the creatures of Lumina who were counting on him, and about the courage that had brought him this far, and he felt something change inside him. "I am afraid," he admitted out loud, "but I am going to do what I need to do anyway, because that is what courage really means." The spider let out a terrible screech and lunged toward him, but Sam stood his ground and held the torch out in front of him, and something miraculous happened. The flame grew brighter and brighter, until it was like a small sun burning in his hands, and the light spread throughout the chamber, touching every corner and chasing away every shadow, to shrink and fade. "You have passed the test," a voice echoed through the chamber, and Sam realized it was coming from the spider itself, which was now no bigger than a normal spider, and looked almost friendly. "The Crystal of Courage can only be claimed by one who faces their fear without letting it control them," the spider explained, "and you have proven yourself worthy." Sam walked to the pedestal and picked up the crystal, which was warm in his hand, and seemed to pulse with a gentle light that matched the beating of his heart, and he felt stronger and braver than he had ever felt before. "One down, 2 to go," Felix said with a proud smile, and they made their way out of the caves and back into the sunshine of Lumina. They traveled for 2 more nights until they reached the Singing Sea, a vast ocean of purple water where the waves made music as they crashed against the shore. And somewhere beneath those waves lay the second sacred object, the Pearl of Wisdom. "How are we supposed to get to the bottom of the sea?" Sam asked, staring at the endless water stretching to the horizon. "There is only one way," Felix replied, "and that is to convince the Sea Queen to grant you passage to her underwater kingdom." He explained that the Sea Queen was a beautiful but suspicious creature who did not trust anyone from the surface world, and she would only help Sam if he could prove that his intentions were pure. They walked along the beach until they came to a formation of rocks that rose out of the water like a crown, and Felix told Sam to call out to the Sea Queen and ask for an audience. Sam felt silly standing on the beach and shouting at the ocean, but he did as Felix instructed, and after several minutes, the water began to bubble and churn, and from the depths rose the most unusual creature Sam had ever seen. She had the upper body of a woman, with scales of iridescent blue and green. Body was that of a great fish, with a tail that sparkled like diamonds, and her hair was made of living seaweed that flowed around her like a green halo. "Who disturbs my waters?" she demanded, in a voice that was both beautiful and frightening. Sam introduced himself and explained his mission to save Lumina from the dark shadow, and the Sea Queen listened with narrowed eyes, studying him carefully. "Many have come seeking the Pearl of Wisdom," she said, "and all have failed the test of truth. So tell me, human child, what makes you think you are different?" Sam did not know how to answer, because he did not think he was different or special in any way, and he said so to the Sea Queen with complete honesty. "I am just an ordinary boy who wants to help his friends," he told her, "and I do not know if I can pass your test, but I will try my best." The Sea Queen's expression softened slightly, and she nodded as if he had said something important, without realizing it. "Your humility speaks well of you," she said, "so I will give you a chance to prove yourself worthy of the Pearl of Wisdom." The Sea Queen raised her hand, and the waves parted to reveal a staircase descending into the depths, and Sam took a deep breath and followed her down into a world of wonders he had never imagined. Beneath the purple waters of the Singing Sea lay an entire kingdom of coral palaces and shell gardens, where merpeople swam through streets of pearl and schools of rainbow fish danced in synchronized patterns to the music of the waves. "This is incredible," Sam exclaimed, surprised to find that he could breathe and speak normally underwater. "The magic of my kingdom protects you," the Sea Queen explained, "but only for as long as I allow it. So do not waste time marveling at the sights." She led him to a great amphitheater at the center of her city, where hundreds of sea creatures had gathered to watch the human boy attempt the test that so many before him had failed. "The test of truth is simple," the Sea Queen announced, her voice echoing through the water. "And you must answer 3 questions with complete honesty, because in this place, any lie will be known instantly." Sam nodded nervously, wondering what kind of questions she would ask, and whether he would be able to answer them truthfully. "First question," the Sea Queen said, her eyes fixed on his face. "Why do you really want to save Lumina, and is it truly to help others, or to prove yourself a hero?" Sam thought carefully before answering, searching his heart for the real truth behind his actions. "At first I wanted to be a hero," he admitted, "because I thought it would be amazing to do something important and have everyone admire me. But now I have seen how much the people of Lumina are suffering, and I just want to help them, because I care about them." The Sea Queen nodded slowly, and a murmur went through the crowd of watching creatures. "Your answer is true," she declared, "so now for the second question. What is your greatest weakness? The thing about yourself that you are most ashamed of?" This question was harder, because Sam had to dig deep into his feelings, and confront things he usually tried to ignore. "I am jealous of other people all the time," he finally said, his cheeks burning with embarrassment. "And I get angry when good things happen to my friends instead of me, and I know that is terrible, but I cannot seem to stop feeling that way." Admitting this out loud in front of everyone made Sam want to disappear. But the Sea Queen's expression was not one of judgment, but of understanding. "Your answer is true," she said again, "and acknowledging your flaws is the first step toward overcoming them. So now for the final question. If saving Lumina meant that you could never return home to your own world, would you still do it?" This was the hardest question of all, because Sam had to imagine never seeing his parents, or his friends, or his home again, and the thought made his chest ache. With sadness, he thought about his mother's hugs and his father's jokes, and the way his bedroom looked in the morning light, and tears began to form in his eyes as he realized what his honest answer would have to be. "I do not know," he said quietly, "because I love my family so much, and I would miss them terribly, and I am not sure I could give them up forever, even to save Lumina." The crowd fell silent, and Sam was certain he had failed the test. But the Sea Queen surprised him by smiling warmly. "Your answer is true," she said, "and more importantly, it is wise, because only a fool would claim to sacrifice everything without hesitation, and true wisdom means understanding that some decisions are not simple." She reached into a pouch at her waist and withdrew a pearl that glowed with soft silver light, and she placed it in Sam's hand. "You have passed the test of truth," she proclaimed, "and you have earned the pearl of wisdom through your honesty and humility." Sam thanked her over and over, and the Sea Queen escorted him back to the surface, where Felix was waiting anxiously on the beach. "You did it," the little guardian cheered, dancing around in circles. "2 down, 1 to go," Sam said, but his voice was tired because the emotional test had taken a lot out of him. They rested that night in a small village by the sea, where the inhabitants were half seal and half human, and very kind to travelers. And Sam fell into a deep sleep filled with dreams of his family. The next morning, they set out for the final destination on the map, the Peak of Heart, which was the tallest mountain in all of Lumina, and home to the third sacred object, the Flame of Love. The journey to the mountain took 3 more nights, and with each passing day, Sam could see the dark shadows spreading further across the land, turning once beautiful places into gray and lifeless wastelands. Urged, because if the shadow reaches the Peak of Heart before we do, the flame of love will be extinguished, and all hope will be lost. They climbed the mountain through howling winds and freezing snow, and Sam had never been so cold or exhausted in his entire life. But he kept pushing forward because he knew so many people were depending on him. Finally, they reached the summit, where a small stone temple stood against the backdrop of the starry sky, and inside the temple burned a fire that was unlike any Sam had ever seen. The flames were not orange or red, but pink and gold, and they gave off no heat, but instead filled Sam with a warm feeling in his chest that reminded him of being hugged by his mother. "The flame of love cannot be taken by force," Felix explained, "and it will only leave its temple for someone who carries true love in their heart." Sam approached the fire slowly, thinking about all the people he loved and all the people who loved him. And he reached out his hand toward the flames. At first nothing happened, and Sam worried that maybe he was not capable of enough love to complete this final test. But then he started thinking about specific memories. He thought about his grandmother reading him stories when he was little, and his father teaching him to ride a bicycle, and his mother staying up all night when he was sick. And he thought about Felix, who had become his best friend in such a short time. He thought about the creatures of Lumina who had welcomed him with open arms and trusted him to save their world. And he realized that love was not just a feeling, but also a choice, a decision to care about others and put their needs above your own. As these thoughts filled his mind, The flames began to move, reaching toward his outstretched hand like a living thing seeking connection. And a small piece of the fire separated from the rest and floated into his palm. The flame of love did not burn him, but settled into his hand like a friendly kitten, and Sam felt tears running down his cheeks as he was overwhelmed by emotions he could not name. "You have done it!" Felix cried with joy. "And now you have all three sacred objects." Sam looked at the crystal, the pearl, and the flame, and he felt the power of each one resonating within him, courage and wisdom and love combining to make him stronger than he had ever been. "Now you must enter the void and face the sorcerer," Felix said, and his voice became serious. "But I cannot go with you into that dark place, and you will have to confront him alone." Sam felt a flash of fear at the thought of facing such a powerful enemy by himself, but the crystal of courage glowed warmly in his pocket, reminding him that he could be brave. "How do I get to the void?" he asked. Felix led him to a spot on the mountain where the fabric of reality seemed thin and weak, like a worn place in an old shirt. He explained that Sam would need to use the three sacred objects together to tear a hole in the void. "Hold the crystal in one hand and the pearl in the other," Felix instructed, "and let the flame burn between them, and focus all your thoughts on the sorcerer who cast the curse." Sam did as he was told, and as the three objects came together, a brilliant light exploded outward, and a dark portal opened before him, swirling with shadows, and filled with whispers of despair. "Remember everything you have learned," Felix called out, "and do not let him make you doubt yourself." Sam took a deep breath and stepped into the void, feeling the darkness close around him like a cold blanket, and he knew that the final battle was about to begin. The void was the most terrifying place Sam had ever experienced, an endless expanse of nothing, where there was no up or down, no light or warmth, only darkness that seemed to have weight and substance. He floated through the emptiness for what felt like hours, holding the three sacred objects close to his chest, and the only light came from the gentle glow of the flame of love burning steadily in his hands. "So the humans have finally sent someone to face me," a voice echoed through the darkness, and it was filled with bitterness and rage. Sam spun around, trying to find the source of the voice, and suddenly he saw a figure emerging from the shadows, a man whose body seemed to be made of the same darkness that surrounded them. "I am Moros," the figure said, "and I was once the greatest sorcerer in all of Lumina, but they cast me out because they feared my power." Sam remembered what the Queen had told him about the sorcerer who had tried to steal the source of all magic, and he knew this was the enemy he had come to defeat. "You are destroying Lumina," Sam said, trying to keep his voice steady, "and innocent people are suffering because of your curse." Moros laughed, and the sound was like glass breaking, sharp and painful to hear. "They deserve to suffer," he spat, "because they turned their backs on me when I needed them most, and now I will take everything from them, just as they took everything from me." Sam could see the hatred burning in the sorcerer's eyes, but he also saw something else underneath it, a deep and terrible sadness that seemed to go on forever. "What happened to you?" Sam asked, and his voice was gentler than he had expected. Moros seemed surprised by the question, and for a moment the anger faded from his face. "I loved someone once," he said quietly, "a woman named Elena, who was the most beautiful and kind person in all of Lumina. Married." He told Sam the story of how Elena had fallen ill with a mysterious sickness that no healer could cure, and how Moros had searched desperately for a way to save her. "I discovered that the source of all magic had the power to heal any illness," Moros continued. "So I tried to take some of it to save my beloved. But the Queen caught me and banished me to this void without even letting me explain." Tears were streaming down the sorcerer's face. and Sam felt his heart ache with sympathy for this broken man who had lost everything. "Elena died while I was trapped here," Moros whispered, "and I never got to say goodbye or tell her how much I loved her." Sam understood now that Moros was not truly evil, but was a person who had been driven mad by grief and loneliness, and he knew that fighting him with force would not solve anything. "I am sorry for what happened to you," Sam said sincerely, "and it was not fair that you were punished for trying to save someone you loved." Moros looked at him with confusion, clearly not expecting compassion from his enemy. "Why would you say that?" the sorcerer demanded, "when you have come here to destroy me?" Sam shook his head and held up the flame of love, which was burning brighter than ever. "I did not come here to destroy you," he said, "but to help you, because the shadow you created is not just hurting Lumina, it is also hurting you." He could see that the darkness surrounding Moros was not armor, but chains, binding him to his pain and preventing him from ever finding peace. "The love you felt for Elena was beautiful and real," Sam continued, "but you have turned it into something ugly by letting your grief become hatred, and I do not think that is what she would have wanted for you." Moros collapsed to his knees, his body shaking with sobs, and the darkness around him began to flicker and waver. "Because the pain is all I have left of her." Sam walked toward him slowly, holding out the 3 sacred objects, and he realized what he needed to do. "Courage means facing your pain instead of running from it," he said, holding up the crystal, "and wisdom means understanding that holding on to hate only hurts yourself." He held up the pearl, which glowed with soft silver light. "But love," he said, lifting the flame, "love means remembering the good things and letting them heal you instead of breaking you." He placed all 3 objects on the ground in front of Moros and stepped back. "You have been punishing yourself for 100 years, Sam said, "and it is time to forgive yourself and move on, not because you have forgotten Elena, but because you have honored her memory by choosing to be the good person she loved." Moros reached out with trembling hands and touched the sacred objects, and as he did, something magical happened. Crystal of courage gave him the strength to face his grief, and the pearl of wisdom helped him understand that his suffering had not been fair or deserved, and the flame of love reminded him of all the happy moments he had shared with Elena before she was taken from him. A brilliant light exploded from the 3 objects, spreading through the void like a sunrise, and the darkness began to dissolve as Moros was finally freed from the prison of his own making. "Thank you," the sorcerer whispered, and his form was changing, becoming younger and lighter, the darkness falling away like an old coat. "Will you end the curse?" Sam asked hopefully. Moros nodded, and he raised his hands and spoke words of power that echoed through the void, and Sam could feel the curse breaking apart. "It is done," Moros said, "and the shadow will retreat from Lumina, and the light will return." He looked at Sam with gratitude in his eyes, and for the first time, Sam could see the good man he had once been before grief had consumed him. "You have given me a second chance," Moros said, "and I will spend the rest of my existence making amends for the harm I caused." A portal opened behind Sam, showing him the beautiful land of Lumina, bathed in golden light, and Felix was jumping up and down on the other side, waving frantically. "Goodbye," Sam said to Moros, "and good luck." He stepped through the portal and was immediately surrounded by cheering creatures, and Felix tackled him with a hug that nearly knocked him over. "You did it," the little guardian shouted, "and you saved us all without even fighting." The journey back to the castle was like a parade, with creatures from every corner of Lumina coming out to celebrate and thank Sam for his bravery. And the queen herself came to meet him at the gates. "You have done something no warrior ever could," she said, kneeling before him, "because you healed a broken heart instead of destroying it. And that is the greatest victory of all." Sam felt proud, but also humble, because he knew he could not have done it without the help of Felix and his grandmother, and everyone who had believed in him. That night, there was a great feast in the castle, with music and dancing, and food that tasted like pure joy. And Sam laughed and celebrated with his new friends until dawn began to break. "You must go home now," Felix reminded him gently, "but you will always be welcome in Lumina, and you can return whenever you wish." Sam hugged his friend goodbye and promised to visit often, and then he walked through the door and found himself back in his grandmother's house. His grandmother was waiting for him, with tears of joy in her eyes, and she wrapped him in her arms and told him how proud she was. "You did what I never could," she said, "and you brought peace to both worlds." When Sam's parents came to pick him up at the end of summer, he was a different boy than the one they had dropped off, more confident and kind and wise, and they could not understand what had changed him so much. Sam never told them about Lumina or the magical door or his adventure with Felix, because some secrets are meant to be kept between a boy and his grandmother. But every summer after that, Sam returned to the old house at the edge of the forest, and every night he passed through the hidden door to visit his friends in the land of 3 moons. And sometimes, when the moon was bright and the wind carried whispers of distant music, Sam's grandmother would join him, and together they would walk through the magical world that had brought so much wonder and love into both their lives. The hidden door remained a secret, waiting for the day when another member of their family would discover it and begin an adventure of their own, because magic always finds those who need it most, and heroes are not born, but made through courage, wisdom, and love.